So this is, I wear a few hats. One of my hats is I'm a senior researcher at Rotterdam School of Management, but I also am a researcher with TU Delft and with the Technical University of Munich. And then on the commercial side, I work with frontrunner projects at EPEA. So, so with RSM, I just gave a lecture there this morning, which is why we have this picture here. The question is, how much will the materials in our faculty building be worth in 15 years? Okay, now I've been talking for about an hour. Do you want to take a break? You don't want to take a break? No? Okay, then I'll keep going. I just wanted to ask. Fine, okay. So, the question is, how much will the materials in our faculty building be worth in 15 years? Anybody know the answer? Pardon?
Twice as much.
Twice as much. It's amazing. It's amazing what's happening in the construction industry. 35% of the cost of buildings like this is in materials. So if you have a 5 million euro building, about 1.7 million euro is in materials. So buildings are basically cycling now. Maybe not the exterior of the building, but buildings get gutted every 15 or 20 years now. So the shell might remain, but everything else gets torn out in 15 to 20 years. And that's, by the way, the economic cycle now for buildings. It's getting shorter and shorter all the time. Okay, so after 15 or 20 years, your 1.7 million euro has become minus 300,000 because you have to pay a demolishing company to take the stuff away. Let me understand this picture. You put in 1.7 million and you have to pay 300,000 to have someone take it away, but that's what's happening in the Netherlands right now. That's one of the reasons why the Netherlands has a property crisis. Because they're stuck with all these buildings that no one wants to pay to take the stuff away. That's one of the big problems. And here's what's happening. There is a universal trend in the building industry, and it's not just in the Netherlands, it's all across the world. It's in China, everywhere. Okay? And the trend is, here's what's happening to materials and commodities markets. It basically actually goes like this all the time, and right now, before 2009 it became inflated, then after 2009 it crashed, then when the government bailed out the banks and pumped gazillions of trillions of euros into the market, all the speculative money needed to go somewhere, so it went into commodities, so the prices have gone back up again, and for sure they're going to crash again. However, in general, in the past 30 years, the real value of materials in the commodities market goes up. So, it's a materials asset. Uh-oh. That's what happens when it goes into buildings. It becomes a demolition liability. Somewhere between 15 and 25 years. This just does not make any sense. But it is also an opportunity, because it means that if you find a solution to this, you're going to get a lot of money back. And that's a value case, especially for municipal governments, who get stuck sometimes with buildings going bankrupt, and they have to pay to rehabilitate the property. And that's a big problem for municipal governments. So, here's our potential. Instead of this, go here. So the question is, how do you do that? So, basically, it's a roadmap. The first thing you do is you do an inventory of what is either, and by the way, you can do this with existing buildings and still make some money. And I'm just going to explain this in a moment. So this works for both existing buildings and new buildings. It works in the existing buildings because when a demolisher walks in the door and you say, okay, so what's it going to cost me to take my building down, or to gut the building? And the guy goes, yeah, okay, 300,000. But what he's not telling you is he's going to sell half the stuff in the building for another 300,000. So he's going to charge you 300,000, and then he's going to get another 300,000 from selling the stuff. So, It's a pretty good deal. And actually, so we did an experiment in Rotterdam. You know the Mercedes dealership that is on this side of the bridge near Erasmus? It's a new one. They just redid it. So this guy, he bought the Mercedes dealership, and he came to us, and actually he came to our partners, and he said, so what can I do to take this thing down and not have such a cost? So we said, let's ask some demolishers what is in the building. Just ask 2 or 3 demolishers to come in and tell us what's in the building. So okay, we asked 2 or 3 demolishers to come in, and one guy, he goes like this. He says, there's this much of this and there's this much of that. And the really funny thing was, he left out all of the metals in the building. I'm sure it was a mistake. He just left them out, right? No metals in the building. Of course, that's the highest value. The other guys underestimated the amount of metals in the building by about 40%. But anyways, you can get the story. The story is that the demolishers actually don't want you to know that they're making a lot of money getting the metals out of the building. Okay? So what we did was we went with a waste management company, and we put them in the middle between the demolisher and the owner. And the waste management company split the difference in the gains, and the demolisher only became the service. So they only pulled the building apart. Then the waste management company sold the stuff out into the market and split the revenues with the owner and reduced the cost by 40% of taking down the building. That's why you can do this with existing buildings. Really remarkable. And there's going to be a lot of that going on in the Netherlands in the next 10 years, because there's a lot of buildings that need to be taken down. Okay, so for new buildings, there's really an amazing thing going on. Most owners don't have a clue what is in their buildings. They don't have a clue. The reason for that is, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons is that there's no relationship between the contractor and the owner. So the contractor does all of this invoicing, right, internally with the suppliers, and all the numbers and amounts and everything are in the invoicing. But the invoicing never makes it into a database that gets transferred to the owner. So the owner, when they take over the building, in 50% of the cases, has no clue what's in the building. Which means that if they want to do maintenance on the building, they have to reinvent the wheel and do an inventory all over again. It's really amazing, and that's what's going on right now in our construction market. So, if you do the inventory at the beginning, and you develop transparency across the supply chain, you solve that problem. And that is exactly what Park 2020 did. We have now developed a method with them of transparency across the supply chain, so that the owner now gets the benefit of knowing what went into the building. And this is real time that I'm telling you about right now. So it's in process right now. Okay, so inventory, first know what you have, right? It seems like an obvious thing. It's the same thing with products, by the way. In half the cases when we talk to companies, they know the things that are required to make the product function, but they don't know what's in the product. Because why? Because they give the job to their sub-suppliers in Asia, and they say, here's what I want the product to do. As long as it's not totally toxic, just put the stuff in. And then they get the product, and they really don't know, half the time what's in it. A lot of the time, really, the manufacturers, when we ask them, tell us to 100 parts per million what's in the product. No, wait. It takes them months to come back, because they have to go back to the sub-supplier. So it's very important to know what's in your product. After that, it's important to assess it for its qualities. What's in it? Are there any toxins in there? How much of it is there? Blah, blah, blah. So you have to do an assessment after you've done the inventory. Then you start talking about, let's design for quality. So that means, let's start talking about the types of materials that we're using. And it also involves designing for easy extraction, assembly, and disassembly. And finally, you need systems partnerships. What do we mean by systems partnerships? Two things. The first thing is, most municipal governments and also private enterprise, but it's important because it's important for municipal governments. When they do tendering, they focus on these individual tenders. The whole structure is to focus on individual tenders, but actually the thing that makes a building profitable or costly is how the systems fit together. And it's very unusual to find a tender that focuses on systems integration, but that's where the money is. So what's happening is that we're tendering all of these buildings and we're looking at the wrong thing. What we need to be looking at is how the systems fit together and support each other, because that's where your operating costs are. So that's one way. So we need the HVAC people working with the facade people. So we need these different systems all working together with each other. But tendering usually doesn't work that way. So we need to redefine tendering. The other part of systems partnerships is the suppliers. So anyone who's done tendering, and I know that Boss has done it and a few other people in the room have done it. The way it normally works in construction is you have a general contractor, they get a price, the architect has sort of designed the building and said, oh, these are the materials that we want to have in the building. But actually that's not what happens, because the contractor then goes out, waits to the very last minute for cash flow, and then screws the suppliers into the ground on price, and the suppliers go out and look for the cheapest material. That's the way it works. So whatever the architect intended to be in there in the first place, in 30 or 40% of the cases, it doesn't end up that way. So again, you don't know what ends up in the building. If you have a supplier community, and by the way, Venlo did this quite successfully. They really started to do this with the City Hall, so they're to be congratulated on it. Is you consult with your suppliers and you start to create a supplier community and say, this is our goal. Our goal is to have materials that are designed for disassembly, materials that have quality to them, materials that are safe, and materials that fit together in the right way. You can only do that if you have a partnership with your suppliers. So that's what we mean when we talk about systems partnerships. And that's what you end up with. This is our goal. Our goal is to get from a demolition liability to healthy materials assets. And the way that we do that is through something called a materials passport. Materials passport is not simply a passport for materials. It's a passport for the whole process. It ties all of these pieces together. It has criteria in it that say, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do that? And at what level did you do it? And then you make that transparent across the supply chain. That is what materials passports are about. Some of you might have heard that materials passports are about environmental product declarations. No, sorry, that's not what they're about at all. Environmental product declarations are designed to show how to minimize your negative impacts on the environment. A materials passport is designed to show you how to maximize the recovery value of the materials in your building and how to maximize the operating value of the materials that are in your building. So what you see now in these EPDs is the diametric opposite of what you see in a materials passport. There is some crossover because of course you don't want toxic materials in your building, so you can use information from the EPDs for a fraction of the passports. But that's not the value proposition in the passport. It's this stuff that is the value proposition. So in 2000, that says 2012, but we actually gave it to the Springer Encyclopedia in 2010, which is why we don't do a whole lot of academic publishing. We just do it in the marketplace. We work with universities, but it takes so long for some academic stuff to get published. It took us 2 years for the Springer Encyclopedia of Sustainability, Science, and Technology to publish our paper on materials passports. During that period, we were working with all of these companies, starting to implement the passports. So, but just to show you, it's in a peer-reviewed publication. It's about 40 pages long, and it describes all the criteria and why we want to use passports. Oops, sorry.